الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. We left off in this book on the section of good and bad bid'ah, and I wanted to go on a bit of a tangent, um, just kind of share some examples of this. I don't have anything amazing in English, unfortunately, so I just want to just give some examples from this book. This book is called مفهوم البدعة, the concept of bid'ah, وأثره في اضطراب الفتاوى المعاصرة, and its effect in the inconsistencies and of modern fatwa. And in reality, this is inconsistencies in modern fatwa is in reality what's the phrase? Is symptomatic of not having a system to begin with, right? So if you are Maliki or Shafi'i in principle, and you have a system, you have ashbah wa nadha'ir, and you have qawaid fiqhiyya, you have all these principles of fiqh in your madhab. So bid'ah is not a thing about usul. It does come into usul very tangentially, but otherwise it's to do with qawaid al-fiqhiyya, right? Because it's not a fundamental discussion, bid'ah, right? It's a fundamental discussion on the level of is the Sharia based on what you think, or is it based on Allah? Obviously that's a simple thing, right? So sahih and fasid is valid and invalid. It is to do with bid'ah in a very general sense. But when you say, for example, this is a bid'ah, this is not a bid'ah, the principles, the specific principles that each madhab will use, this is to do with, you will see this in the qawaid, but more particularly you see this in the ashbah wa nadha'ir. Look at examples in the Hanafi school where they say this is a bid'ah, we don't accept it, right? And then walk in the same way. Look in the Hanbali school, look in the Maliki school, look in the Shafi school. There will all be differences, but they will have a system, and it won't be just random, right? It won't just be random. So anyway, the point is, this book says, number one, the Salaf had ikhtilaf, right? The early Muslims disagreed on what is a bid'ah, what is not a bid'ah. Therefore, we can disagree on it, and it's okay, and we have to be inclusive. And then B, the later scholars disagree, and then C, certain modern scholars have a random system concerning bid'ah. Right? Just want to give examples then. So here's the concept of innovation in religion and its impact on the confusion of modern fatwas, etc. This is the book that doesn't have anything else in English. Um, so I'm just going to go over the kind of the contents of the book, just have an idea. So so basically, people who are scholars who are very lenient concerning bid'ah, muwassa'in, the people who say, yeah, this bid'ah is a very big thing, and there's a lot of things that considered as bid'ah. Um, how they understand the certain hadith to do with bid'ah. Those who are mudayyiqeen, they say, bid'ah is only restricted to certain things. They have a different view. Um, how Imam Shatibi looked at bid'ah and how he defined it. Um, how the khulasat al-khilaf al-manhaji, how the different systems, how they work around bid'ah. The concept of hukm al-tark, the Prophet didn't do. How significant is that? Right? The difference between not doing and the sunnah of not doing. There's a different thing. One is not doing. The Prophet having had not done something, or the Prophet intentionally not doing something. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ confirming certain new things that the Sahaba did. The Prophet ﷺ rejecting certain things that the Sahaba did. So the scenarios where you see the Prophet ﷺ doing bid'ah, are people doing bid'ah from the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet ﷺ confirming it. Another scenario is Prophet ﷺ rejecting it. Um, how the Sahaba then dealt with new issues after him. Um, the Sahaba inaugurating certain new things after him and other people not rejecting them. Um, so the point is the Prophet ﷺ accepted and rejected, and the Sahaba accepted and rejected. So it cannot be an absolute sense, simple as that. التوقيف في العبادات, how worship is based on Allah's command and not based on our own invention, of course. And then certain scenarios of how the Salaf, the early Muslims, disagreed. Um, so here, for example, they disagreed concerning, here we go, التلفظ بالنية في الصلاة. Should you say, I'm now praying 4 rakat dhuhr? Saying Bismillah allowed or not? Sunnah for some, bid'ah for others. Qunut al-Fajr, Sunnah for some, bid'ah for others. Qunut al-Witr, Sunnah for some, bid'ah for others. Um, Putting one's shoes between one's two feet, Sunnah for some, bid'ah for others. Lying on one's side after the 2 rakahs of Sunnah for some, bid'ah for others. Pausing on one's way up from this the after the first and third rakah. This is in the Shafi school, right? Sunnah for some, bid'ah for others. Um, Calling the first adhan on Jumu'ah, bid'ah for some, second, not bid'ah for others. Having a particular time, how long you can wipe on your khufs, bid'ah for some, not bid'ah for others. Praying the 2 rakahs before Maghrib, praying Duha, Salat al-Shukr, Salat al-Istisqa. So Imam Abu Hanifa says this doesn't exist. Others say it does. Mihrab, doing a khutbah on the minbar in the masjid in Mecca, making dua after giving salams and prayer. Um, uh, right, aqiqah, countless things. Removing one's mustache, is it bid'ah? Is it not bid'ah? There's like, so I don't know how many things. Hugging someone when they go on Eid, etc. So there's 50,000 gazillion examples of this. Um, and they all show that basically the Salaf disagreed, and that's okay. Praying more than 11 rakats in Ramadan, right? So countless examples of where the Salaf. So this is a very good book. This book was actually given to me. Like it's so good that scholar was like, no, you need to actually everybody get a copy of this book. It's really important. It's one of the best modern books on Bid'ah. And it just says it kind of confirms the whole idea of the ta'addudiyya of pluralism. There's more than one way we can look at things. It's pretty simple. Unfortunately, there isn't. There needs to be, but inshallah, I'm trying to do. If you've seen any of my YouTube playlists, I'm trying to do like on marriage and other things. I'm trying to make it into. It's not that difficult. It's not like complex. Just put it into some slides. Maybe 1 hour presentation, 2 hour presentations is pretty obvious. It can be summarized quite easily. Like it's not that complex. But there are certain key things that people just need to understand. So, for example, they're stuck on right, wrong answer, right? So there's certain, it's like playing chess, right? Like somebody who wants to checkmate in the first move, like you can't checkmate in the first move. That's impossible. You can't do that. So the first move is, do you understand pluralism? No. Okay, we're not going to go anywhere, right? Do you understand pluralism? Do you understand Islamic orthodoxy? Right. These are these kind of two things. So, okay, that's that point. Now we're going on to the next thing. So the next thing in the book is he goes on to the Asharis, right? Asharis are kuffar, we're Salafis, meaning we're on the Salaf, and there's something else. So basically, this is competing for orthodoxy. Who represents the deen, right? Who represents the deen? So I just want to go on again a tangent today about this. Mm, And so we're talking about the Asharis. So this is another thing then. With the Wahhabi movement, understand the Wahhabi movement initially is not a fiqh movement. So Salafi movement is a fiqh and aqidah movement, whereas Wahhabi is simply an aqidah movement. So there was an issue about Sufis and worship of sheikhs and worship of shrines, etc. And the issue then of Asharis as well. 1 second. So I just want to give a sketch of who are the Muslims. So we have Muslims, okay? And they basically, uh, so as we know in history, we don't have time to go through all of these things in history. We had the fitna during time of Sayyidina Ali. And so then we get three camps, okay? The group is Al-Jama'ah, okay? And then we get the sect, supporters of Ali, Shia, okay? And then we get the um, rebels. Okay, so these two both share in an idea of an ideal world. Like everything should be perfect. Everybody should do what is right. Okay. Whereas al-Jama'ah, what happened with Jama'ah is when Sayyidina Ali was killed, uh, the Ummah just continued in general continued its with Sayyidina Muawiyah. Now Sayyidina Muawiyah was originally a rebel fighting against Sayyidina Ali. But now he's in control, it's okay. So the way that the Jama'ah says it is just stick with the group, just continue, keep the status quo, it's okay. And more importantly, when his son came in, Yazid and Muawiyah, it doesn't matter that he's not righteous. That's not relevant. The point is, it doesn't matter who was right, who was wrong. It doesn't matter who's righteous. The point is you're in charge. That's it. Right? It's very pragmatic. Right? So their politics, they're pragmatists. Right? in in a not in an absolute sense, but pragmatists, right? Whereas for the Shia, they are Shia. These but both of these groups are idealists, right? Which leads to fanaticism. Fanaticism. Is that right? Fanaticism. Yeah. So now, Jama'ah. Okay. So the Shia then is originally a political thing, a moral and a political thing, and Khawarij originally a moral and political thing, right? Um, the, with the Khawarij though, because it's a moral thing, they believe that major sin equals disbelief, right? Now, did the Shia always believe that? I don't know. They do have that belief that a major sin is you're like the just like the like the Mu'tazila, but it's not quite so simple. Major sin equals disbelief, right? Major sin So it's very this is very dangerous because whenever you do a major sin, you leave Islam, and if you leave Islam, you're now to be now going to be killed. So the Khawarij, and these come up have many different forms, come up in different shapes and sizes over here in history. Right? We're not going to go to the Shia in detail right now. Now with the pragmatists, then that's now Jama'ah, right? So you have this word Jama'i, like al-Jahiz in the third century uses the word Jama'i. I've never seen a Shi'i or a Jama'i. So you can understand this is one group and then this is another group, right? So the group, right? Just gonna go here and make it easier. And then we get the group. Okay, now we're talking about we are the group. Okay, so it's important to understand that the people who we're going to mention now are not some other group, right? They are physically and academically one thing, right? They're talking to the same thing. So we can talk about like Az-Zamakhshari, who's going to be Mu'tazili. He wrote just like any other scholar would write on a book, for example, comparing the positions of the Shafis and the Hanafis, right? It's a classic thing to do because they were the kind of the two biggest madhabs, or the two madhabs that had the most, contention, right? And so they are Jama'i, like Mu'tazili is Jama'i, right? So then from this group, then who represents this group? That's the question in this book, basically, right? This book, there's many things that are Khariji about the Salafi movement, but they don't identify as Salafi. They didn't identify as Khariji, and they don't identify as Khariji. They don't have the same things. Anyway, so then we then had three groups here, right? Philosophers, and we had the what's it called? Apolo Apologetics. What's the word that goes with apologetics? Apologetics. I don't know what the word is, but people involved in apologetics. Okay. And then
Apologists?
yeah, it's not really the word. I think is that the word? I don't know. Right. Uninvolved. Okay. So these people have a lot of crazy ideas, right? You can add to these people as well, like the Christians as well, because there's other things that Um, but the issue is basically in the Abbasid period. So now we're going into the second and third centuries. There's all these ideas that come out in the Muslim world, right? And some of these things started earlier, but come out in the Muslim world, and and now we need to deal with them. So those people involved in apologetics, they're talking to philosophers who have Hellenistic ideas, who have these crazy ideas, all those different kind of ideas, and Christians and Jews to some extent, and they're basically trying to use logic, right? We're trying to use logic because that is the shared currency, right? Currency of logic. You can't use revelation with these people really. Um, to to silence them, right? Why, for example, how do you know that um, how do you know that certain ideas, for example, from the Hellenistic world, the universe has already existed? How is that logically not true? Jesus can be God. How is that logically not true? Right? Um, and so these are the different situations. So this is what we call kalam, right? This is called kalam. This is important. At a certain time in history, kalam is this, right? And then this is something, so people who get involved in Kalam, these are people talking to these people, okay? So it's important to understand that a lot of their discussions then are formed as a reaction to Hellenistic views and a reaction to Jewish views, to Christian views, etc. Right? So, but these again, these are essentially, okay, essentially the group. So now we have Ahl al-Jama'ah. These are all people Jama'ah. The problem with these people, they are wrong, right? Obviously. And these people also fell into errors, right? So then who's right? These people, okay? So right, wrong, wrong. So the Wahhabi sees himself as this person. Okay. He says that's where I live, right? So you have to understand that when people look at the past, they look at the past and they put themselves in a particular time and in a particular mind, right? So, you know, Trump, for example, he sees himself in a certain place and a certain time, and he analyzes, he looking through a certain lens, and he sees this is what's going to happen, right? Other people look at it in very different ways, totally different ways, right? So the Salafi is going to see himself going back to the time of the Salaf, this period here, and he sees himself, he's looking through the eyes of someone like Qadi Abu Yusuf, who said, not knowing about Kalam is is knowledge, and knowing about it is ignorance, right? And they have nothing to do with these people, nothing to do with these people, and it's very simple. The currency of these people is Quran and Sunnah, right? Their currency is Quran and Sunnah, texts, right? Revelation. So their currency is not logic. They're not using logic. They're not using philosophy. That's for sure, right? They just use it. They just that's it. That's all they're doing, right? Example of that. Abdullah ibn Umar, he hears about people who don't believe in predestination, and he says, "You're wrong. Predestination is true. Here's a hadith." There we go, right? So they don't get involved. They're not going to debate with these people. They're not going to argue with these people, and they're going to quote certain sources. So this is the method of the people of the first and the second centuries, is that we just simply don't get involved, right? You don't know what gender you have, that's wrong, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, and He's mentioned men and women. There we go. So I'm not going to start talking to you about anything. I'm not going to get involved in your world about whether gender is absolute or not, or whatever is liquid. I'm not going to talk about that. You're just wrong. It goes against Quran and Sunnah. Simple as that. So this is where they see themselves. So today, when they hear anybody who sounds like these people or sounds like these people, they'll categorize them as them. Okay. So these people, who did these people evolve into? They became what we call the Mu'tazila. Okay. These are called al-Mu'tazila, right? Al-Mu'tazila, long reason why, right? Um, so then you have these two things, and then these are called Ahl Sunnah. Now, again, this is important. Why are they called Sunnah? Sunnah, I mean, not bid'ah, right? So this is very important. Why do we call it Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? Because they don't do bid'ah. Yeah. What do you mean by bid'ah? I mean aqidah, right? Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We don't do bid'ah. This is bid'ah. So notice they're talking about the ideas are all off. Okay. But we're Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, meaning so we're Ahl Jama'ah wal Sunnah. That makes sense. Jama'ah, not Ibadi, not Khariji, and not Shi'i. Okay. And then of those groups, we're not Mu'tazila. We don't have weird ideas like that. Okay. And so we identify, I'd say we, or Asharis and Maturidis identify as the heirs of this group, and a modern Salafi Wahhabi would identify as this. The problem is the modern Salafi will again use the language of this period. So this is the whole thing with Salafi fiqh and Salafi aqid and everything, is they're going back 1,200 years, and they're using a rhetoric or a development. We're talking about something that's totally different that's way later, and we'll talk about that in a second. Go ahead, Badr.
Yeah, so I was curious, when when does is there a when does it become distinguished between refuting disbelief and then becoming something else like
We'll,
this?
we'll see. We'll see in a
In
second. Yeah, we'll see. We haven't got there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now the point is these people are uninvolved. So therefore, they do not have something. They don't have when they describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you quote Surah Al-Ikhlas, for example. They don't have a system. So they are analogous to tajweed without tajweed rules. Okay, so this is very important. Uncodified. Because they're not getting involved in these discussions, they are uncodified. So they have no system, right? No theology. They don't believe in theology itself. So this is a problem saying it's there's no such thing as theology. I don't even have it. Like you say, what is your stance on, for example, you say a Sunni Muslim, by the fact that you believe in gender, you have a certain sociological or certain biological madhab that you have necessarily adopted. You're like, what does that even mean? So, well, you believe in gender polarity, right? There's A or B. So therefore, that is a particular medical, biological, sociological, psychological madhab that you've adopted. Along with that, there is a whole theory and a system that implies. Whether you knew about it or not, it's actually there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So, for example, somebody comes along and says, I believe I have a right to shoot people if they come on my property. You have now adopted a certain philosophy vis-a-vis property and vis-a-vis human rights and vis-a-vis all sorts of things, right? You know, by the fact that you say it's my property, that means you're not a communist. You're not a socialist. Like you say, well, I don't even know what communist means. It's fine, but you're not that. You actually adopted something. But the point is that these people, they don't have a system. It's uncodified. They don't have a clear definition. Like talking about what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by existence? What do you mean by these things? They don't have a system, right? And they don't want to have a system. They're happy with the vagueness of the Quran and Sunnah, right? So that's a key thing. Happy with vagueness, right? That's what we have. That's what the Prophet ﷺ taught. That's what we have. Thank you very much. Happy with vagueness. And unlike fiqh, right? Unlike fiqh, you can't have vagueness because tomorrow I need to apply something. Does it break my wudu? Does it not? You can get away with vagueness in aqidah. You can say that Allah knows best what it means. End of story. Right? But this is where it gets dangerous. Okay. So now, in this, we now have problems. So now we're going to have, for example, these people from the Mu'tazila. In reality, it's the other way around. Mu'tazila were created by these people. But anyway, part and parcel of this group here. I'm going to try and put some lines here just to make it a little bit clearer. Um, these people are kuffar aslan, are not even Muslims anyway. And then we're going to have here. So part of these errors, for example, you're going to fall into certain errors. Um, uh, rejection of uh, predestination because it doesn't make logical sense. Predestination. Okay. Rejection of seeing Allah. Beatific vision here, but beatific vision. Seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Judgment Day on in heaven. Um, major sins, rejection of faith of those who commit major sins. Other key things with the Mu'tazila. I'll leave it like that. Rejection of speech of Allah's speech. Allah doesn't speak according to these people. So there in this discussion, they fall into certain errors because they actually their currency is logic, and their interaction with logic is not so they're called rationalists. They're not does not really have their system is not really right. So this now creates a whole problem. So rejection of predestination that results then in a reaction from some people. So that results in a group of people who believe in what's it called? Fatalism, right? You have no free will. Fatalism, no free will, right? Which is also wrong. Okay. We get another group, for example, that are going to believe in um, anthropomorphism, right? So you don't think you can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the judgment day? Of course you can. Okay, how is that possible? Allah says it in the Quran, it's in the Hadith. Okay, explain that then. Oh, that means Allah has a body, right? Anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism. We get then uh um Murji'ah, no, that's not such a big deal there. But here, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anthropomorphism. Allah's beginning of speech, we're going to get again anthropomorphism, but things like saying, Allah does have speech, and the Quran, the Mus'haf itself is Allah's speech, right? So you get all these different reactions. They say things like don't really make sense, like uh, Allah has a like the difference in Allah having a beginningless eternal speech and Allah having an endless speech, right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been making a sound. Like there's a sound that's always existed and it will always exist, and that's Allah's speech. It's a bit weird. So then you get all these problems. You get like countless problems. These systems create all these things. So now these people now have to react, and they're now going to split into two camps. Okay? So they are going to get involved or not get involved. So involved or not involved. Okay? So now they're going to get involved, and what's going to happen is it's going to create they're going to have to define themselves, right? You're going to have to define yourself, codify yourself rather. They're going to codify. And by codifying, what they're going to have to do, they have to use logic. You can't codify without logic. You can't, it's just like someone who's doing tajweed. If you do tajweed, you are necessarily talking about the body, right? You start talking about the mouth. So now a dentist is listening to you talk about tajweed. He's like, oh, you're talking about the mouth. A Christian dentist is listening to a tajweed class. Like, oh, you're talking about phonology and phonetics. This is a science that is shared throughout the world. So what you're talking, when you say a T, how you say a T and the type of T that you do, or a D, and this is this and this is this. The terms in Tajweed, all of them exist throughout the world in different sciences, right? So like some guy, I don't know what it is, like 2000 years ago was talking about Tajweed in India. Like, how is he talking about Tajweed in India? Why would he do that? It's cool. He's talking about language and letters and you know. So now it's a shared thing. So as soon as you codify, you're going to have to get involved with logic, right? So now we're going to get involved in logic, and so this creates the Ash'aris and the Maturidis, right? Maturidis. No, the uninvolved is the Hanbalis. Okay. So again, going back, a modern Ash'ari Maturidi identifies himself as here and here. And he says, what was the key change that happened? Is we were uncodified and then we became codified. That's all. So the Ash'ari sees himself as a codified, you know, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? The Hanbalis, they didn't particularly like this approach, and there was tension at certain times between them. But the point is they were uncodified. So not involved and not codified, right? So that's very important, not codified. So it's very different. There's a difference between having a stance and not expressing your stance, right? So again, I say, okay, but if you're such a sexist and you don't believe in gender, liquidity, whatever, what's your stance on this? And he's like, I don't have a stance on this. What would I say? All I don't know. I'm not going to start talking about my stance on gender and my stance on I don't know, sociology and socio gender and I don't know. I just believe in the in revelation. What's your problem? So he's not expressing his thing, but in reality, he does. When you say that you believe in two genders, you are actually saying you are making certain medical, physiological, philosophical, um, sociological, psychological statements, right? You're actually making that, right? So when I come along and say, for example, homosexuality is morally bad, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not created it as a means to happiness, that means you sound like Freud, because Freud was said that homosexuality was a mental illness, right? So now you're Freudian. It's like, what do you mean Freudian? I'm not Freudian. What are you talking about? Like, so you or are you not Freudian in your in the way you view sexuality? Like, huh? What are you talking about? So now, like, so can you see that? So you either go A or B, right? So now you're going to have to get into Freud. You're going to have to get into all these different things. You're going to have to get into psychology. You're going to get into socio-gender, all this stuff, because the fact that you've now adopted something in an organized, codified way, you're going to have to do that. So the Asharis Maturidis, therefore, for example, have to take on a certain madhab regarding being, which is a philosophical discussion, and logic, and all these kind of things, right? The Hanbalis don't have to do that. Hanbalis just say anything else. The problem with the Hanbali approach is it's just vague. Okay? So then what happens then is because it's vague, you get certain Hanbalis over time who are anthropomorphist, accidentally anthropomorphist, right? So the key person is Qadi Abu Ya'la, right? Oh, you can have time put anthropomorphist. I'm gonna have to shrink this to the text is too big. Make it smaller. I can't make it smaller. Can I? So you get somebody like Qadi Abu Ya'la who says basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand and this and this and this and this and this. Now the Hanbalis, what they say is Allah has a hand but it's not a body. The Ashari say that doesn't mean anything, does it though? Right? The Hanbalis say it's no, it's okay, we can just say that, right? Allah Allah is in the sky but he's not in space, right? So that's what the Hanbalis say. Allah he's not in space. The anthropomorphist is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in a physical place, right? So then you get a reaction, Ibn al-Jawzi Hanbali saying, what are you talking about? We Hanbalis do not believe in anthropomorphism. This is insane. This is totally off, right? So in reality, the difference between the way that we, Ash'aris and Maturidis and Hanbalis, modern Hanbalis see things is we actually have the same thing. It's just a semantic difference. So when a Hanbali says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, but it's not a physical thing, we're like, yeah, Imam Bayhaqi said the same thing, big deal. It's not an issue. It's fine, right? Whereas a modern Salafi slash Wahhabi would say, no, stay here. They're seeing themselves 1,100 years ago at this stage in history, and they're saying, we're happy with vagueness, leave it as it is. We don't need to codify things, leave it as it is. And then, and whatever is like this is this. Okay? So for them, who do they see these people as?
The Mu'tazila.
So Ash'ari Maturidi, you're just a neo-Mu'tazili, not a problem. That's what you are, right? And they will use any quote that is quoted here from our Salaf that we would agree with that says anything about logic or philosophy, and they're like, yeah, you guys are just forget about it, right? You just, right? Just forget about it, right? Like imagine, for example, somebody, I'll give you an example. Somebody comes up to me And this is a real question that was put to me. Okay, a real question. There's a guy. He gets married, and he can't have kids. Okay. When he was in his teens, he was having some funny issues happening, but otherwise nothing concerning. And he got married, and he can't have kids. After 2 years, he goes to the doctor. The doctor says, "What? You have XX chromosomes." What does that mean?
He's a woman?
But
Exactly. So he doesn't look like a woman. He's functioning as a man. He has male private parts and he presumably has intercourse. Otherwise, he wouldn't come to the doctor and say, "Why can't my wife get pregnant?" The issue is he has XX chromosomes. So now his question is my marriage valid? Because according to my chromosomes, I'm a female. So that means I'm a female who married a female. So it's not. So then I asked the geneticist and he's like, it's not that simple. Right? This is a Muslim, righteous Muslim. He's like, it's not that simple. And there's other things when you talk about gender, right? So now somebody gets my words and they say, "Oh, Fareed, are you an absolutist? Do you believe in gender polarity or gender fluidity?" And I'm like, he's like, "Well, this person, if you, I say here, they put on, CNN, Fareed, if it's XX, is that male or female?" And I say, "Well," and I say, "See, right?" And they put me in this situation, right? They put me in the situation where I'm either A or B. So here we say, you guys, do you follow Quran and Sunnah? Do you believe in this uncodified? You happy with vagueness? Only currency is text? Yes. Right? Okay, you're Sunni. Otherwise, you're Mu'tazili. So the Salafi Wahhabi is happy with vagueness that can result in anthropomorphism. They know what anthropomorphism, they don't identify themselves as anthropomorphists, but it can result in that. Um, right? And they're happy with that vagueness. Okay? They're happy with an uncodified theology. Here's the problem. Along comes Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and he codifies it in Kitab al-Tawheed. And so you end up saying crazy stuff because what you've done is you don't believe in a codified system and then you codify it and they end up saying something really weird. Right? Like, so it's like, again, Badr is having this conversation about gender, and he says, definitely men cannot marry men. And they're like, okay, fine. Tell me about gender then. I want to know from a physiological point of view, from a scientific point of view, tell me about gender. From a psychological point of view, from a sociological point of view, from an emotional point of view, tell me about gender. Are men like this? Are women like this? Da, 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 da. And he's like, okay, fine. So he rolls up his sleeves, starts saying stuff, and it's a bunch of nonsense. So before, had he just not said anything, he would have been fine, right? He would just been fine. Like if you were literally uninvolved, like I'm just not going to say anything. I don't want to talk about whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this or this. Allah says in the Quran, just leave it alone, right? The problem is then with Salafi movement today is again they actually have their own aqidah, which is funny. And so they have certain things they're going to say. So it doesn't make but so they're basically they say our only currency is Quran and Sunnah, and we don't use logic and we don't own those things, which that doesn't really make any sense at all, of course. Someone who doesn't use logic, that makes like no sense. It's like I don't use grammar. Like what does that mean? I don't use grammar, right? So anybody who knows anything would know that it makes no sense to not use logic, right? So the fact that Aristotle is one of the first person who wrote on logic, that doesn't make logic good or bad. Logic is just like math, right? Now, philosophy is something else, okay? So is this picture making sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so now I want to talk about two things just about this spread, right? So inshallah we have enough time. So here again, we're going to have this in slides, but weren't able to do this, right? So this is now um, it's important. There's a whole book in English like about the Asharis and who they are, right? So again, an Ash'ari slash Maturidi identifies who does he see himself as? He sees himself as Sayyidina Ali, right? He identifies with Sayyidina Ali. He identifies with Sayyidina Muawiyah. He identifies with Imam Ahmad, right? So they see themselves as, we are the heirs of Imam Ahmad. You guys are not the heirs of Imam Ahmad. They see that the differences between the Asharis, Maturidis, and Hanbalis as khilaf lafzi, right? It's just semantics. If you want to say Allah has a hand, but he's not a body and his hand is not a physical object, so okay, fine. Like they just out of adab, basically, out of adab. They're saying that Allah is in the sky. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Amintum man fis sama." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do you feel safe of he who is in the sky? Okay, Allah is in the sky, but not physically. Okay, what does it mean to not physically be in something? We leave it like that. So the Hanbalis, they do that. Just they'll say it and then just leave it like that, right? But they're quite clear. Whereas, again, if you're not clear, it's very easy to become anthropomorphist, to just believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is physically in a space, right? So, and again, I spoke about before cherry picking. Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, what is it? That we all agree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the sky, but not in the way that people of bid'ah understand it, and saying that there's a part of the sky that is above Allah, right? So you can, so again, if I cherry pick for Ibn Taymiyyah, I can make modern Salafism. If I take the whole picture, it doesn't really work. So there's a lot of cherry picking, a lot of cherry picking happening. Okay, so here this is just about the spread of al-Asharism. So Imam Abu Hassan al-Ashari, who's originally a Mu'tazili, so that's why he can kind of do this thing. He's originally Mu'tazili, he leaves that and he becomes Sunni, right? And then he starts this codifying process. So here I want to talk about the spread of it. So you have to understand how many people were Ash'ari, right? So here this we have Imam al-Dhahabi talking. Imam al-Dhahabi, great hadith, he was the Ash'ari as well, talking about Abu Dhar al-Hirawi. He is one of the most important narrators of Bukhari from the main students of Bukhari. So today when we read Sahih Bukhari, we are reading Sahih Bukhari as narrated to us from Al-Hirawi, from Al-Mustamli and Al-Hamawi and I can't even pronounce the name, Kamash Mihani, right? And so like the way that the deen has reached us is through Asharis, right? This is very important to understand. Like everybody for the last 1,000 years has been Ashari, just like everybody for the last 1,000 years has been four madhabs. Okay, that's very important. It's a historical thing to understand. Badr, can you send a message on the Muqaddimah class that we're going to start maybe in 10 minutes?
Yes.
So he said, so he talks about now the spread of Ashariism into North Africa and into Spain. Okay, so he says, أخذ الكلام عن رأي أبي الحسن عن القاضي أبو بكر ابن الطيب الباقلاني. So what did he do is he studied the position the Ash'ari Aqidah. Who did Hira? So Imam Abu Dhar al-Hirawi, he's originally from Herat in Afghanistan. He comes to Baghdad and he becomes Maliki and he studies with al-Baqillani. So al-Baqillani is it's like a second or third generation Ash'ari who is huge, is very important Maliki and important Ash'ari. He says, وَبَثَّ ذَلِكَ بِمَكَّةِ. So then Abu Dhar al-Hirawi went to Mecca and he started spreading this codified system, which is Ash'ariism. Okay? وَحَمَلُهُ عَنْهُ الْمَغَارِبَ إِلَى الْمَغْرِبِ وَالْأَنْدَلُسِ. And so then people coming from the west, from Spain and from North Africa, coming to Mecca, they studied with him. He's this amazing Maliki, Muhaddith, etc. وقبل ذلك كان علماء المغرب لا يدخلون في الكلام. Before that, the people of Spain did not get into, and North Africa did not get into kalam anyway. بل يتقنون الفقه أو الحديث أو العربية. They would just be into fiqh and into hadith and into Arabic language. ولا يخوضوا في المعقولات, and they didn't deal with philosophical and these kind of discussions. Right? And so who is this Abu Dhar al-Hirawi? Right? So he says, قلت هو الذي كان ببغداد يناظر عن السنة. So this is Abu Dhar al-Hirawi, this Ashari who is spreading Ashariism throughout the world. Imam al-Dhahabi says he's the person who is defending the Sunnah. So notice Abu Dhar al-Hirawi identifies himself as here. Al-Dhahabi identifies him as he's this thing. Right? وطريقة الحديث. بالجدل والبرهان, right? And he's defending this thing again in a codified way with using argumentation and proofs. وبالحضرة رؤوس المعتزل والرافضة والقدرية وألوان البدع, right? And at that time, there was all these different people, the Mu'tazila, Shia, Qadariya, people don't believe in things, and all different types of bid'ah, right? So he's in Iraq. وَلَهُمْ دَوْلَةٌ, right? And they had a lot of power at that time. وَظُهُور بِالدَّوْلَةِ الْبُوهَوِيَّةِ الْبُوَيْهِيَّة, right? And so at that time, these Mu'tazila and these other people, they were significant. وَكَانَ يُرُدُّ عَلَى الْكَرَّامِيَّة, and they used to rebut the people anthropomorphists. وَيَنْصُرَ الْحَنَابِلَ عَلَيْهِمْ, and he would help the Hanbalis, right? So this is Abu Dhar, the Hanbalis and the Ash'aris, they're one. وَيَنْصُرْ الْحَنَابِلَةَ عَلَيْهِمْ, right? وَبَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ أَهْلِ حَدِيثِ عَامِرٍ, right? And the relationship between him and the scholars of hadith was great. And so who, for example, one of these great hadith scholars, Ad-Daraqutni. So Daraqutni was privy to this new Ash'ari movement where we don't just quote Quran and Sunnah. And he's like, yeah, totally fine with it. He didn't see himself as Daraqutni didn't see it as something else, right? So the way it's phrased by Salafi/Wahhabis is you're either here or here. You're either Sunni or Mu'tazili, or Neo-Mu'tazili, which is Ash'ari Maturidi. The way the Ash'aris and Maturidis see them, and the way that history sees them in reality, is that they're the same as this, and that at certain times there was tension here. There were certain times there were tension between these two camps, right? But otherwise, it's, these people are here, they're not over here. Okay? And so Abu Dhar al-Hirawi, again, this is this key person who spread Ash'ari. Again, if he's a kafir, he got serious problems. He is our source for Sahih Bukhari, basically. He is a student of Ad-Daraqutni. Daraqutni was aware of what was happening at the time of his teachers, totally fine with it, no issues whatsoever. Okay, so that's one key thing, and we see this again time and time again. So key thing to understand: if you have a problem with the form of the madhabs, and if you have a problem with Maturidis and Asharis, you have a problem with 99% of the ummah. So that's fine. You're allowed to do that, but don't pervert history. Like don't do like Israeli style, like, oh, we've been here the whole time. I don't like nothing crazy like that, right? Like you're not from here, right? I mean, you can take the land if you want, but you can't pervert reality, right? Now, there's other things in this as well. So I want you to listen to this. I can't really go over all of these things. I have a million things to go over right now. But anyway, the development of kalam. So this is a book called Al-Milal wal-Nihal, right, by Ash-Shahristani, about different sects and beliefs. So he mentions he says اعلم أن جماعة كثيرة من السلف كانوا يثبتون لله تعالى الصفات الأزلية من العلم والقدرة والحياء والسمع والبصر والكلام والجلال والإكرام والجود والإنعام والعزة والعظمة، ولا يفرقون بين صفات الذات والأفعال بل يسوقون الكلام سوقا واحدا. He says, if we look at the Salaf, they basically said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this and this and this, every single thing Allah tells us in the Quran. They just put it in a non-codified system without distinguishing, is this an attribute of his being, of his essence, or an attribute of what he does. وكذلك يثبتون صفات خبرية مثل اليدين والوجه ولا يؤولون ذلك, right? And similarly, we find many of the Salaf of confirming that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says khabariya, it comes in hadiths, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand and he has a face, etc. And they would not interpret in any way. إلا أنهم يقولون هذه الصفات قد وردت في الشرع نسميها صفات خبرية. And so we call this it's in the hadith, so we just accept it as it is. ولما كانت المعتزلة ينفون الصفات والسلف يثبتونها سمي السلف صفاتية والمعتزلة معطلة. He says when the Mu'tazila came along and they said, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have speech and he doesn't have this and doesn't have that, and if you said that you would sound like a Christian, then what happened is then you had these two groups, the Salaf, this group, is called the Sifati, the people who believe in attributes, and the Mu'tazila as the people who are Mu'attila, don't believe in attributes. فبلغ بعض السلف في إثبات صفات إلى حد التشبيه بصفات المحدثات. And so he said some of them, some of these, he says here, the Salaf is not really Salaf, but because really in the third century, you find then some people being in this camp. You find some of the people of this camp getting to the point where it says here. So again, this person here who believes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an object because it says that you will see him, he sees himself in this camp, right? He sees himself in this camp. He doesn't see himself in this camp. I'm putting him in this camp because I'm saying that this is wrong. But he doesn't see himself in this camp. He says, no, the hadith says that, so therefore it's here. So they got to the point where they start describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they would واقتصر بعضهم على الصفات دلت الأفعال عليها وما ورد به الخبر. And others I've got to skip a little bit. It's getting too long. The point is these kind of things. The point is things developing into things develop. We mentioned these basically things developing into these things. So it's talking about anthropomorphism. So he says وأما السلف الذين لم يتعرضوا للتأويل ولا تهدفوا للتشبيه. So he said the people they didn't do ta'wil, didn't say it means this, and then they just were uninvolved, right? Like Imam Malik. فمنهم مالك بن أنس رضي الله عنه إذ قال الاستواء معلوم etc. والإيمان به واجب etc etc etc. Right. So basically, and so okay, here. It says حتى انتهى. No, this is not what I wanted anyway. That's fine. Okay, so then it basically says he got to the point of etc. Time of Abu Hassan إلا أنهم باشروا علم الكلام وأيدوا عقائد السلف بحجج كلامية وبراهين أصولية وصنف بعضهم ودرس بعض حتى جرى بين etc. So then you get to the point where you have this merge where you have logic, using logic, and the sunnah, and one defending the other. This is not the quote that I wanted, but it's fine. So there's a key point though we have to understand is that there's a stage perhaps in the 5th and 6th centuries where logic, so how much of this are you going to use, right? And so Imam Taftazani, for example, in the Sharh al-Qaid, he says that it got to a point where you could hardly tell the difference between a book on Aqidah, right, which is supposed to be codifying the Quran and Sunnah in terms of beliefs, and you can't separate it from a book on philosophy. So now I come along and I read your book. I'm like, your book is not even talking about Allah and His Messenger. Your book is talking about existence and contingency and this and that. Like, what are you even talking about? Right? So it's very important then. Remember, reaction. So there's two things that's going to happen again and again and again with the Salafi movement. Where did you put yourself in time? The Salafi puts himself here. He identifies with Imam Malik and he says, I am Maliki in my Aqidah, I am Hanbali in my Aqidah, and I'm here. I'm uninvolved, but yet somehow involved. I don't have a codified philosophy. My theology is doesn't based on these things, and I'm happy with vagueness, even if it might result in anthropomorphism. This is where he sees himself. He sees himself back there, right? Similarly, he's going to react. He comes to these books. You see, you guys are just you guys here. These Asharis and Maturidis over time will become so philosophical that it's like, where's the kalam in your kalam? Like where's the aqidah in your kalam? Like it's two things, right? And so you're going to have a reaction. Always remember that, a reaction throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not saying there's not a problem here. I'm saying that reaction is off. Anyway, my apologies, we've gone over time, and I wanted to share some of these things. All of these things should be discussed in another topic in reality. But the key thing to remember, 99% of the ummah has been following of the former madhahib. 99% of the ummah has been Maturidi or Ashari. Maturidi and Ashari is just a codified version of exactly what Imam Ahmad is saying, what Imam Shafi is saying, what all of these people, what the Salaf are saying. It's just a codified version. The relationship between Kalam and Aqidah is the relationship between Tajweed and Quran. So imagine doing Quran without Tajweed. It's the same thing. All it is organization. That's all it is. Okay, well, shall we stop there? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك